Yo, I'm back. In this video, I am going to show you how I mirror stonewash a knife blade. My process is a little bit different from other knife makers. Basically, the way that people traditionally do a mirror stonewash is they will take wet or dry sandpaper and basically progress up the grit, sort of like they're doing a hand rub satin, until they get up to around 2,000 or 3,000 grit, at which point they will take the blade to a buffer with compound and buff it until it is mirrored. This method will work to varying degrees of success depending on the skill of the knife maker and how much time and effort they're willing to put into it. The problem with that method, there's a few problems actually. First, some steels are prone to orange peeling with that method, although there are ways to avoid that. But the main problem is that buffing compound is not super abrasive. That's why you have to sand it to a high grit to begin with. And if you're using sandpaper, that's a lot of elbow grease, that's a lot of effort, and steels that are higher wear resistance and have higher vanadium content and therefore lower grindability will be much tougher to mirror polish using those methods. The only abrasive that is basically perfect for polishing whatever steel is diamond, which is why I use diamond paste instead of buffing compound when I'm polishing my blades. I also do not use sandpaper. I use sanding stones instead, which I'm going to show you guys. I'll tell you where to buy them, which ones I use. But basically the main point is that the way that most knife makers do mirror polishes and mirror stonewashes is not the way that I do it. And my methods will give you a different result, which you can see for yourself at the end of the video and decide if you think that it looks good and it's worth the effort. I've seen a lot of other knife makers mirror polishes at knife shows like Blade Show and CCKS, California Custom Knife Show, and I have to be completely honest, they look pretty whatever. They look pretty dog shit. So I felt like it would be good to put out a video on how to do some mirror stonewashes that look a little bit better than what I've seen at most shows. An example of a maker who does a really nice mirror stonewash would be like Shirogorov, and I'm not going to give you examples of bad mirror polishes and stonewashes, but they're out there and you'll see them. It's harder to tell in videos and on Instagram and stuff, but if you see them in person, you'd see all the little inconsistencies in areas where grinding lines and sanding lines weren't completely removed, and anyway. So we're going to start with some setup. So this is my sanding station. It's basically just a wooden board connected to a workbench. So basically as simple as you can get. I've been using this for 4 years now and it's fine. You don't need to have a fancy sanding station. Now, the sanding station has been used to sand a lot of different materials, which is why it looks black now. It was previously a light brown. And so all of this is diamond compound as well as little particle grits of sandpaper. So I don't want to put my blade directly on this because that's going to scratch the blade. So I get a fresh piece of paper every time and I set it on my workstation to protect the blade from all those abrasive particles. Key important note here is you have your workstation plank and you want the tip to be just about slightly or just about to go over the edge of the plank, so to speak. So you want it to be slightly like that. That's so you can access the tip later when I'm using my tools to sand. And I'm going to cover the flats with this paper and then clamp it down there. This protects the blade from getting scratched by the clamp itself. So that's why we put the paper there. And then I'm going to clamp it down. I just use an F clamp to do that. It's much faster than using a C clamp. And there you have it. We're set up to start our sanding. Now, as for what tools I'm using, this is just the cheapest possible pneumatic, air profiler. I believe it's a C-Fang from Amazon, and I'll link that in the description. But basically, what this does is it's powered by air, and this is a hose that goes to my air compressor. I have a 60-gallon air compressor. You don't need an air compressor that intense to run this, though, but it is nice to have more air. And I run it at around like 30 psi, so like I said, not super intensive. This tool holds a stone, not sandpaper, And these sanding stones are very particular. There's different types. There's wire EDM, there's die maker, there's mold, whatever. The type of stones that I use are stones that are not recommended for this purpose, but in my opinion are really good for them anyway. And that is the Falcon Tools N-type stones. Most people will recommend the much harder wire EDM stones, which I also have from Guess Wine. I think these stones are shit for this application, even though everyone says that they're good for it. The reason why is pretty simple, and it comes down to friability. What friability is the tendency or proclivity of your abrasive to break down upon rubbing. Now you might say, well, isn't that a bad thing because you're losing abrasive while you're losing, it's wearing out faster? And the answer is no, because yes, your wire EDM stone will last literally forever, but the problem is that you are grinding steel basically, or sanding steel, and it's loading up, and then it's cutting worse and worse, but because it's not wearing away and revealing fresh abrasive, your cutting speed slows down dramatically. These will wear away much faster, which is going to be advantageous because one, you're cutting faster, and two, it will follow the shape of your grind. So in the case of a flat grind, it might not matter to use a wire EDM stone as much, but if you're doing a hollow grind, you want high friability because these areas right here, you can see it's beveled, right? That's because I'm currently sanding a flat grind. If I were to sand a hollow grind, this would slowly become a curve that follows the exact radius of your hollow grind, allowing you to also mirror Stonewash hollow grinds. So that's why you want high friability sanding stones. Now a little word about the technique of how to use this. So like I said, we're running at 30 psi. I'm going to crank it to the highest possible speed. Now, there are some air profilers that have a reciprocating feature. In other words, this part right here will move forward and back like this. That's not necessary. The most important part is the vibration. So these will vibrate. It comes with this little sleeve to protect your hand from the vibration. Vibration is not good for your body or your hands or your nerves. So you want to minimize how much vibration by holding it as much as possible only on this protected sleeve, just for the sake of your bodily health. Now, as for how you use this, it's pretty simple. Basically, I'm going to show you the motions with it turned off, because if I turn it on, the air compressor is going to be really loud and you won't be able to hear me speak. But basically, you're going to hold it like so. You can hold it, some people hold in different ways. Lindy told me she holds it like this. I sort of hold it like a hybrid where I hold it like this. But it doesn't really matter how you hold it. Just find what's comfortable for you. And you basically just want to go up and down, right, across the full length of the blade. Now, once you get to your plunge, in this case, I have a diagonal plunge, right, like this, right? Instead of a straight plunge, diagonal. So when I get to the plunge, I'm going to want to go perpendicular to the plunge and sort of bang into it almost. Not like aggressively, but you are going to sort of have to be banging into it if you want to get those plunge scratches out. This is one of the advantages of the air profiler over sandpaper, is that the air profiler is very effective at doing your plunge area, whereas sandpaper really struggles to get those plunge line scratches out. So let me take this out of my setup real quick just to show you a little bit about the technique. So basically, you're going to be running the air profiler, and you'll notice that I put a bevel here on the belt grinder. This bevel allows you for more surface contact, so you can just sand faster. That's all it does. If I were to use a hard corner like this, you can see barely any of the stone is contacting. It's only contacting it at one point. But if I use a beveled surface, right, then there's more surface area contact, and I'm going to be sanding much faster. So you're basically going like this, up and down, up and down. Now, like I said, once you're going up and down like this, once you get to the plunge, you're turning your air profiler and going into the plunge like so. You want to actually contact the plunge itself. You don't really need to worry that much about running over the plunge onto the flat. It will sort of catch as long as you're not being silly with it. Should sort of catch and sort of bang into that plunge line. Now, an interesting area is the tip. That's sort of an area that a lot of people struggle with. What I do is I take this where it's normally on this beveled surface. I'll take it, and once I get to the tip, I will put the stone down flat and use the flat of the stone to get the tip. Now you got to make sure that you're not banging into it with this black metal piece right here, because if you just go forward too much, you'll bang into the tip, and obviously you will damage your tip. But it's not that serious. So that's basically the method we're going to be using to sand this. Sorry. And so I'm going to be basically doing that now. A couple things to note as well. Let me put this back in the clamp setup. I'm going to be periodically spraying the blade with WD-40. I don't ever use the air profiler dry. I always use WD-40. Some people say use Windex. I found that Windex is not as good as WD-40. That's all it comes down to. With WD-40 is just better. So just use a bottle of WD-40. Spray the blade real quick. You don't need to spray it super often, but you'll notice that there's a mud that forms, which is all the material that you're removing. So I periodically take a cloth and wipe it off. Now the reason why I have my laptop here is because the sanding process is very boring, so I like to watch anime and other things while I'm sanding. Now like I said, the air profiler is very loud, and so because the air compressor is running, it's like 80 decibels, so it's bad for your ears. I wear hearing protection, which also has Bluetooth. These are WorkTunes. And the WorkTunes are really nice because I can watch my anime while I'm sanding and not get bored. This increases my productivity and it's very professional. So, we're going to sand this. I'm going to turn on the air compressor. I'm going to basically show me doing it a little bit, and then I'll speed up the rest. So, just so you can see the motion of how I do it, and then once the air compressor turns on and it gets loud, I will speed up the video and skip to the part where all of the grind lines are gone. So the grind lines all go in this direction. That's why I'm sanding in this direction. It's the opposite direction or perpendicular to the grind lines basically. And that way I will see very clearly when all the grind lines are gone. And I'm currently using the Falcon Tools N grade 320 grit because this is a 320 grit belt satin finish off the belt grinder. So I'm gonna start with 320 and then gradually move up the grits. Last thing I want to mention, you want to use very light pressure when you're sanding. Basically just the weight of the tool itself, even maybe a little bit less than that, because the vibrations are what's doing the work. If you're pressing really hard thinking that it's going to make your work go faster, you're actually going slower because you're killing the vibration. So just something to note. But yeah, we're going to get started. I'm going to turn on the air compressor and start sanding a little bit. And then once I just show the motion a little bit, I'm going to time lapse and then show you what it looks like with the full 320 grit finish. So we turn on the air compressor, spray it with WD-40. You turn this on by turning right here. And you see it's turned on. And now first I start in the center. And you can already see what it's doing. It's marking the blade. Now when I get to the plunge, I turn it. And I sort of bang into the plunge slightly. I can linger there a little bit, but not for too long, because you'll create divots and dips. And you keep moving it around until you get all the scratches out. As I get to the tip, I'm going to set my air profiler down and go like this. That's basically what we're going to be doing for the next however long it takes to get these scratches out. Hopefully the audio is clear enough for you to be able to hear me over the air profiler. But this is basically all we're doing. So having shown that, I'm now going to do the time lapse and just do the whole thing, 320 grit, flip it over, do the other side, 320 grit, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So you have an idea of what it should look like when you're at that stage of the process. All right, so I just finished 320 grit on both sides. I'll show you what it looks like so you have an idea of what it should look like. Let me wipe this blade down real quick. And the important thing to note here is that it's not supposed to look good at this stage. It's supposed to look bad, so to speak. So basically you'll see here, you see all these marks and stuff, right? But you'll notice that they're all going in this direction, the direction I was trying to sand in, and not, you don't see any of the diagonal belt grind lines anymore, which is our only goal at this stage, is to get rid of those lines. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically do the exact same thing repeatedly, but just at higher grit. So we just use a 320 grit stone. I'm gonna go up from 320 to 600, from 600 to 800, and then from 800 to 1200, but doing the exact same thing. And the only thing is that it is a little bit hard sometimes to tell if you finished getting rid of the previous scratches, because normally when you're hand sanding, you can go in one direction and then go in the other direction, so that you have lines that are going in different directions, so when you've gotten rid of all the scratch lines. It can be a little bit challenging to tell when you're using stones, because you're only going in this direction pretty much, or this direction perpendicular to the plunge. You wouldn't want to go like in this direction with your EDM stones. There's not really a good point to that. So typically the amount of time I spend is I try to just spend an even amount of time at each area. And in total I spend about, say like at this point, like the longest stage is like just getting rid of the grind lines. Going like for each stage, so if I was doing like 600 grit on this side, I'd spend like maybe 15 minutes or something like that, just 15 minutes doing 600 grit on this side, 15 minutes on this side, then 15 minutes 800 grit, 15 minutes 800 grit, 15 minutes 1200 grit, 15 minutes 1200 grit, and that usually works fine for me. And at that point I can start doing the polishing process. So that's what we're going to do now. I don't think there's any point in really time-lapsing this. I'm basically going to be doing the exact same thing. All I'm doing is pulling out my stone that I just used, and you can see how much I've used, right, because it's such a softer stone, so I've used a lot of it and there's not a lot left here. And I'm going to take this out and I'm going to replace it with the next grit and just keep doing that. So this is how the blade looks when it's at a higher grit, and this is at the point where we can start doing the buffing process. So in this case, the customer wants the flats to be this finish and just stay that way, and then only the grind to be mirror stonewash. So what I'm going to do is, when I'm setting up to buff, first I'm going to get a fresh piece of paper. Let me just come back and get that. So you saw how dirty that piece of paper was getting. It's just covered with WD-40 and particles of steel and abrasives. So just to avoid any tragedies where you get to like close to a mirror polish finish and then get a scratch. I mean, it doesn't matter too much sometimes if like, you're stone washing afterwards, you might cover up the scratch with the tumble marks, but it's better not to risk it. Especially if you get like a long scratch or something that would be visible even through the tumble. Like, you just don't really want to risk messing up something you've put a lot of time and effort into. So I advise at this point, once you've sanded it to the grit you want to stop at, to get a fresh piece of paper or something to protect your blade. And if this clamp will cooperate with me, I'll show you how to buff the blade. So you'll notice I'm clamping the blade again. And ooh, I actually forgot something. So like I said, the customer only wants the grind to be mirror stonewash, not the flats. So I'm actually going to protect the flats. It's a diagonal flat plunge, so I'm just going to use a 1, 2, 3 block and basically make it impossible for me to accidentally buff the flats. Now in some cases, like I said, you can what's it called? You can do a mirror stonewash grind and still have the flats be satin, even if you have the flats like it's not a full flat grind, or sorry, yeah, even if it's not a full flat grind. But I'll show that in some other video. Right now, this is how we're doing it: full flat grind. We're covering the whole flat with the 1, 2, 3 box. It's impossible to buff there. Now, what we're going to use to buff is actually a Dremel. Important thing to note about the Dremel is that, first of all, let me show you what we're going to be using. We'll be using these barrel-shaped felt tip buffing wheels. Now, the reason why we use this is because it has a small diameter and therefore has a lot of power, and it's going to buff very quickly. The one danger with this method is that because it's a small diameter and it's spinning very quickly, you can generate heat through rubbing and friction. So you want to make sure that, we're going to run it pretty fast, probably around 20 powers where I usually have it. Basically, the only way to make sure that the blade stays cool is to periodically check it and make sure you're not pressing too hard. Now you might be tempted to press harder because that will buff the blade faster and you'll get to that polished finish much faster. But you don't want to heat up your blade too much, especially around when you're getting toward the edge. Like you can press pretty hard near the spine because the blade is thicker there, but toward the edge you really want to just use light pressure and let the abrasive do the work. As for the abrasive we're going to start with diamond abrasive. So start with around 4000 grit diamond paste. I'll link this in the description, hopefully, if I don't forget. We're just gonna put some diamond paste on it. You know, there's no finesse to it. And you basically are just going to use this area only of the felt tip, like so. So imagine this, my palm is the blade flat, and you're just gonna go all around and just basically buff out the scratches. And you'll see that it'll get very close just off this to a mirror finish. We're gonna have to do a couple other things after to make it actually good, but it will be very close to a perfect mirror just off of doing this. And then we'll go to a higher grit, and then we will have to get rid of some residual marks because these felt tips are not designed to be used like that per se. There's a little rubber or whatever material center right here which is going to leave some swirlies which we're going to have to remove after we're done using the felt tip. So I'm going to show you real quick like an example of me doing it, but it's going to take every part of this process is just something repetitive and boring at times, which is why I have the laptop when I watch anime. But basically it's going to just be a long, just me going, and just keep doing that until the blade is fully polished. There is no special technique here. You literally just keep going until it's polished. Which is why it's very labor intensive. All of the aspects of this takes a lot of time, but that's what people wanted to see. So we're going to show how I do it real quick, and here we go. So that's basically what it's going to look like. Now, as for when to add more diamond paste and when to wipe, you're sort of just going to have to get a feel for it. When you feel like the abrasive isn't cutting much anymore, that's when you add more diamond paste. Just because you see all this stuff here doesn't mean there's still diamond paste that's cutting. The black is basically steel that you're removing with the diamond paste. So as this gets blacker and blacker, okay, it's time to add more. So you're going to wipe the blade first, then add more diamond paste. You can sort of tell the temperature based on how quickly, and this is something you'll get a feel for over time. I can sort of tell the temperature based on how quickly the diamond paste melts when it contacts the blades. You can see here, because it's warmer, the diamond paste immediately melts. Normally it's sort of like a thick paste, but as soon as it touches the blade, it melts, which tells me that the blade is getting a lot warmer, right? So every now and then, if it makes you nervous, you can take the blade and just dunk it in water and bring it back and keep going. Not really a problem to do that, but yeah, that's basically what we're going to be doing. Just keep add diamond paste, buff it, remove, clean it off, add more diamond paste, buff it until we get all the scratches out pretty much. So yeah, I don't know if I'll do a time lapse or whatever, but it's basically just going to be exactly what I was doing just for a very long time. So this is how the blade looks with compound still on it, and you can't just wipe it off with a cloth because it's so polished it's just going to smear. And so if you really want to get a good look at it, you can either use Windex or you can take it to a sink and just rinse it off with soap and water, and that'll get you a better idea of what it looks like. But what I wanted to show is, you see these swirlies, right? See those swirlies? That's from the tip of this right here. That rubber part is basically rubbing those areas to make those swirlies. And that's just gonna happen with this method. And so we're gonna remove those after we're done polishing. But first I need to check if it's sufficiently polished before we take it to the next step where we would remove those things. So let me go rinse this off real quick and then I'll show you what it looks like right now. All right, so this shows it pretty clearly. You can see how reflective it is and you can see all those little swirlies that we're gonna remove. You see how the swirls play in the light. But yeah, let me just check. And I haven't gotten all the scratches out yet, so I'm still gonna have to go a little bit more. Maybe you can see, not the swirlies, but some of the residual scratches that are still there. So I'll have to keep going, but that's just one side. Obviously this side is still completely not touched at all. But yeah, and so but the reason why I like Mirror Stonewash is because, you know, all the fingerprinting and stuff can be easily wiped away when it's tumbled. You can just take a cloth and wipe it, whereas right now if I wipe it, it'll just smear, because that's how all mirror polishes are, is the more polished it is, the more it smears, basically. So before I do the other side, actually, there's no real reason I need to do both sides for the video. So I'll just show you how I remove these swirlies. I'll take over the camera and show you how I do that. So I've rinsed it off and you can see how reflective it's become, but you can see these swirlies still, right, that are playing in the light. So I haven't done the other side yet, but I guess there's no real reason I need to do both sides on video. But basically we're gonna get rid of these swirlies and, you know, residual marks. So first I need to get rid of the residual marks, which just means I need to buff more. To get rid of the swirlies, what I'm basically gonna do is take it to the buffing wheel. I have a variable speed buffer. It's a jet buffer, but it doesn't have to be variable speed, obviously. It's just nice to be able to control the speed. And basically, I'm gonna put the same type of diamond paste, but a higher grit. Where did it go? Oh, right here. So this is 1 micron diamond paste. And I'm basically gonna, oh, it's already, my wheel is already covered in it, but I'm gonna put some of that on there. I have a little bit of red compound on there as well, and then I'm gonna buff it slightly, and that will get rid of these swirlies. All right, so as for how we apply the paste to the wheel, you can put it on the wheel, but that's kind of, it'll fly everywhere, so it's better to just put it on the blade. Also, don't use your finger. The reason why I'm using my finger is because I've already set up the camera and I don't want to go get like a Q-tip or whatever to actually apply it. Because now that I have the diamond paste on my finger, it's just like, I guess I'll wipe some on the wheel. But anyway, so now I'm going to lightly buff it. You don't need to go crazy buffing here. You're just getting rid of the swirlies and refining it a little bit. But yeah, so I'm going to turn on the buffer and we're going to just buff it lightly. So you can already see those swirlies, those little swirlies are pretty much gone. I'll clean it off and show it back in the light in a second. So let me rinse this off with water and I'll show it in the light again. So now that I've rinsed it off, you can see those crazy intense swirlies are pretty much gone. So what I'm going to do next is tumble it, and then I'll show you what it looks like after tumbling. I'm just going to hold my phone here because I don't want to set up the camera again, but basically I use a Rotary tumbler. This is a Franklin Arsenal Platinum tumbler. I have it filled with top line aggressive ceramic, the extra aggressive, ultra aggressive ceramic media. You just throw the, well, I have to do the other side, but I'll just throw it in here and repolish it and then do the other side. But just to show you, I'll stonewash this side and show you how it looks. I only put it in here for like 2 minutes, so yeah. Let's put this lid on. This is hard to do with one hand. Maybe I should have set up the camera. I'll just let it leak a little bit. You want to tighten it a lot because otherwise it leaks all over the place, as you can see, but it's fine. And we'll tumble it for 2 minutes. I realized I should have been holding my camera in this orientation, but it's too late now. So here's the mirror stonewash in different angles, different lights. And yeah, that's roughly what it looks like. It does look different in different lights. I think it looks best in sunlight personally, but that's the result that you get roughly. Now, this actually isn't done because I have to, I didn't fully do it, and I could have polished it a bit more, which I'm going to do. I'm going to repolish this side completely, because if I were to polish this side and then tumble again, this side would be more tumbled than this side. So from the beginning, I was going to have to redo it anyway. But you roughly get the idea of how to do it and what it's supposed to look like. And obviously you can just keep buffing more and more if you're not happy with, you know, the finish. But yeah, we basically went from a belt satin grind to this ugly sanded finish to this. And then I'm going to add the swedge after, but that's obviously a separate thing. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that answered all your questions on how to do this. Obviously, it's a little bit of an unconventional method, but it works really, really well, as you can see. So yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. Peace.